Greetings, friends. I come to you today with another excellent, top quality, oh, who am I kidding? It's really bottom of the barrel, fishing for the lowest common denominator content there is by scraping the dregs of meme culture in a shameless and gutless attempt to cash out on the trend of analyzing the most important cultural artifacts and art form of our time, which is online meme culture. And you know what? Someone said to me on Break the Rules once, they said, Gio, I think it was Paul Town actually. He said, Gio, you should have really cashed in back in the day on what's the guy? He's a furry or something. I don't know. The guy that does the wrestling videos with a lot of explaining the significance of them. See, I could have done that. Or I could have been like Meme Analysis. I could have done it. Because I was writing about memes in 2015. I wrote Synchronous Arisings, that one article, and West Coast Reactionaries in the beginning of 2016. Anyways, I can't be bitter. I'm happy for other people. Well, I'm happy for Meme Analysis, and maybe not the whatever. Today I want to do a deep dive. No script, like that one WCW promo. Goldberg is going off the script, which subsequently, destroyed kayfabe or whatever was left of it in the late 90s. I wanted to do an off-the-cuff exploration of this graph that sort of semi went viral on Twitter, explaining the quote-unquote meme eras. Now, I know right off the bat, I just want to preface this with not only will it be an exploration of the graph, but it will also be a subsequent, I wouldn't even call it thesis, I would really call it a collection of ideas, or even underneath ideas, sort of like extra sonic personal sentiments that are kicking around in my mind around the nature of how memes are evolving and changing without sounding too ridiculous and LARPy, actually making headways in terms of becoming legitimate art forms that can solidify culture in our era more than anything else. Because we've seen, and I'll explain this with one portion of this graph in particular, the total collapse of signifiers, the semantic apocalypse, the semiotic collapse. Now culture is felt organically in ways that it wasn't for a very long time. So in a way, we're kind of returning to tradition, quote unquote. We are returning to a notion of a collective unconscious that is influencing the creation of meme culture itself. And try as they may, the culture industry, they are trying desperately to commandeer and steer meme culture, which they have been at least somewhat successful in, and we'll get into this. Another preface I want to make apart from that, so it'll be a two-parter. One being exegesis, another being a rant on the possible future of memes. What I want to say just right off the bat is that this graph is in no way exhaustive, or is it really kind of in keeping with what other people are saying? They're saying that the dates are all wrong. They are saying that this graph excludes quite a bit of the development that happened on the internet during these times, from the mid-2000s to the 2010s till now. So let's get on with this. Here we have the four eras of meme culture. So these dates are all wrong. Like, for example, the MLG thing started in around the 2010s, right? Not just 2013. So 2005 to 2013, the classic era. Then 2013 to 2017, although really the date is wrong. The Mlg Era, which is it was big, but it was being crowded out by other things. Of course, they're going to exclude Peppy. They're going to exclude the frog, right? That's really the mono symbol that eclipsed, I would argue, all of these memes in general. But that's just my own bias, being, someone who is radicalized by Chan culture rather than radicalized by something awful than Tumblr. So we'll get into that. 2017 to 2019, Surreal Era. Then now 2019 to present, post-irony. The simplest one would be the first one, the classic era. Now, there were some memes in here that were, I would say, the reverberations of them were a bit older. I mean, there's a lot of these memes that came from Usenet, early internet, text chat realms that have been forgotten to history, really. But here we have what I would call the Age of Innocence, the classic era, which is mostly rage comics and mostly very one-dimensional expressions of immediate emotions or puns or mimetic monotypes that can easily fit into everyday life So we have like Trollface, we have Bad Luck Brian, we have the Honest Penguin, but then Honest Penguin gets mixed with, I forget, and a lot of the Rage comics. And, Forever Alone, I think in this era was probably one of my favorites for obvious reasons. And also, Russell Jimmy's was another one. I distinctly remember those two tugging on my heartstrings. We have sort of the irkings of what's going to come along later, because people have made the observation that Doomers are kind of like, they come from the Rage comics. So like Wojak comes from Rage comic, at least its most early like in utero form, in situ forms of Wojak comes from this era. Now, here we have the Age of Innocence, obviously. We have one-dimensional memes that just express things, they're very kid-friendly. They come somewhat out of emo culture, like Derpina, for example, and they are just expressions of the most base emotions. So Mother of God, and of course, notice how in this era, they are at the cusp of the internet creating unique culture, but it's still largely wedded to the larger culture industry around it. So, for example, the one guy, I think the New Atheists used the guy, like, what the hell or whatever face. I think it came from that guy who went on Bill O'Reilly, who's, I forget his name, Jeremy Glick or something? I forget. He went on Bill O'Reilly back when he was popular, and he talked about how we shouldn't, invade these other countries because my father died 9/11. And then Bill O'Reilly infamously like chewed him out on air and chewed him out in the green room. So we still have this sense of the internet can't produce 100% original and unique and creative culture. It's still largely wedded to the culture industry outside of the internet. And this was like even before YouTube, I think even before Facebook, or rather Facebook was just getting off the ground. So this is like still within the realm of the MySpace era. People didn't take the internet seriously, and it wasn't a big thing. It didn't have any wider reverberations. Okay, but there's a problem, because the memes that come after, they become, I would say, not as complex, but they certainly become more like multisyllabic, because now they're taking cultural influences from other realms of the internet itself. So, okay, now second era, 2013 to 2017, but we all know it's from 2010 to like 2015. By 2017, the MLG thing was kind of wearing thin, because Call of Duty, as you know, was wearing thin because Activision just like ran it right into the ground. So we have the Mlg Era, we have Oh Wow, we have Sonic, Gotta Go Fast, we have, of course, Shrek Fedora, Hypno Toad, we have Doge, and Doge is like, I would say, he was the one that won out of all of them, because Doge, as people know, had a sort of revival recently, because Doge could express a post-ironic truth. And the way I'm talking about this is very pretentious and very stupid and very like, oh my god, talking about memes. As Meme Analysis says, memes do matter. So the MLG Era, my unique thesis is that because of the ultra-violence of the video games, because of the one-dimensionality of Call of Duty itself, and because of the rise of the Let's Player, what we have is we have younger millennials trying to LARP their older siblings in the early 2000s. To me, and this is my personal thesis, I don't know if anyone's talked about this, the MLG era of memes, that was recapitulating the energy of the spirit of the early 2000s. It was loud and fast, and instead of nu metal, it was dubstep. Instead of like watching Natural Born Killers or other media like that, it was the more advanced first-person shooter games. So it wasn't like playing Doom in your like dorm in like what is it, like 1998, something like that. We have like millennials basically trying to LARP Gen Z by adopting this very brutish, ultra-violent form of media and content, and it's all about like, oh baby, a triple kill. It's all about expressing emotions through this sense of ownage and brashness and like very extroverted sort of sentiments. So for example, we have a lot of the early 2000s, early YouTube, like New Atheist fedora tipping sort of memes going on, because the lingo and the language that came out of, and again, Zoomers don't know this, but back in the day, YouTube used to have a reaction algorithm where if you were reacting to a video, it would place your video next to the people you're reacting to. And this would never work nowadays, obviously. So imagine an algorithm where a smaller YouTube could basically automatically get views from a bigger one. So a lot of the new atheist stuff came out of this. It was just people with like point and click cameras, webcams, their phones. They would record with like terrible audio, and they would talk in this lingo about, I own those theists. I own those fundies, maximum pawnage, And so what happened was, during the Mlg era, we really start to see the growth of the memes becoming more ironic, multisyllabic, polyphormous. They can express different things. They are ironically spoofing different forms of media. So that is really important, because to me, what this graph excludes is, what was the most important meme to come out of roughly the Mlg era? Besides all the hit markers, like those memes didn't matter because they were so fundamentally predicated upon video game culture, not even particularly good video game culture, but first-person shooters that were all the rage at the time, and sort of like later millennials just totally forgot about them, because then even Let's Plays themselves became more advanced, because Let's Players started playing a variety of video games. You know the story, right? What was the important meme that this graph excludes? Peppy, Wojak. This was the beginning. This was when Peppy was like happy and jovial, and there was a sense of brightness. Then it later became the troll Peppy. It became this sort of detached, ironic, brash, extroverted version to the like emotive, inward, introverted, what's the personality type, INJP or whatever. That's sort of like Wojak's sentiment. That is expressing something else. So the Peppy is very indicative of this particular era. And of course, what else happened during the Mlg era? Gamergate, the culture war being brought to the internet in ways that it never was before. And let's not, I criticize Gamergate a lot because a lot of them were grifters and they failed and they fumbled everything and they just were out for themselves. They became marks for themselves because now, for the first time the first time really in forever, now we have, like, to quote Jim Cornette, they took the marks out of the stands and they put them in the ring, and now they're all marks for themselves. So now we have genuine internet personalities starting to actually solidify cultural power. So, for example, and I'm saying he's a mark for himself, he's probably one of the better ones, and not equating him with Gamergate either, but PewDiePie, I think he showed up in a South Park episode during this time. So, and people started to notice genuine internet culture, and to this day, people, for self-serving reasons, either because it was their legacy or like the opposite, because they want to bring out the demonic specter of Gamergate, because they're journalists that are going to lose their job soon. So we have this birth of a real renaissance of internet culture to the point where it's affecting real world politics. I mean, of course, I'm skeptical of that thesis, because the radicalization thesis that blue ticks and bread tubers and other odious people bring up on the left is that they think that Gamergate was the first inroad that caused Trump, that caused the Capitol thing. You name it. Anything, any sort of evil, both real and imagined, that the right wing has done is because of Gamergate, put it that way. That's how these people think. Now we have, I would say this date is wrong, but we have quote-unquote the surreal era. Okay, to me this date is wrong because a lot of these memes started in the 2010s anyways. Because apart from a few blips here and there, the 2010s were really a cultural dead zone. Let's face it. I mean, let's just... Jack from the Perfume Nationalist, he talks about this, how the 2010s just shredded unique culture and the unique potentialities of the internet. Because then, Web 2.0 came, the Web 3.0, and then the corporations moved in and corralled the unique spaces of the internet. All social media sites started to affirm dominance upon popular discourses and also the psyche of people themselves, and the sort of gamified interactions that social media not only enables but guides people into in terms of how these sites are structured to achieve certain behavioral metrics that can translate into maximum consumerism and really maximizing, like almost chaos maxing, in the sense that social media breeds sociopathy. Really, I mean, my good friend on Twitter, Egg Report, said that the social media gamifies for being a sociopath. And so that is just a side point. And I know it's not a unique or original critique, but the surreal era solidified how just dead and worthless and sterile and like ironic, like totally irony poisoned the 2010s were, the later 2010s. what happened was after Gamergate, when all of the people started to really go by the wayside or wane in popularity, you have this, in my opinion, a Redditification of popular culture on the internet. The surreal era is this indication of the way that people lived in the late 2010s, the late Obama era, where there was no more vitality or energy left. There was no more transgressive force until the era of Trump. And like I've said, other very smart people have said Trump is the greatest living performance artist ever. But that's, again, another video essay. If you want to know more, you can, of course, pick up Ending Bigly, where my essay is in it, where I explain this. But really, the later 2010s, the late, terminal neoliberal Obama era is when capitalist realism, finally sunk its claws into the internet. And then, of course, people praise the economic recovery and so forth. But that all had to do with this growth of the surreal memes, where now memes are deep fried and they're being put through editors. And it's all of this ironic. It was the remnants of the MLG era, where, what survived was Killuminati and the Lamau aliens and what's the guy, Markiplier going E. It was just basically the Reddit humor of lol so random, because the randomness became this indicator of, well, I guess we don't have anything meaningful to attach ourselves to, so we might as well just be random. We might as well just have the surrealist sort of Dottism that was in a lot of ways a failed Dottism, because it didn't have any sort of spirit of the unconscious underneath it. It was pure surface. It was just purely editing and surreal for surreal's sake. It's sort of like that one line from The Simpsons where Moe changed his bar. He had some designer come in, and the old guard, Lenny, Carl, and Homer and Barney, they went there, and they're like, what's all the eyes around? He goes, oh, it's Pomo, postmodernism. What do you mean by postmodern? Weird for the sake of weird. It's weird for the sake of weird. So this was, unfortunately, how Dadaism died, and it gave way to German Expressionism. We're entering, and people make this comparison between our era and the Weimar era, but say that surreal memes in terms of art, in terms of the development progression of art, and there's one person who actually said this in the the replies to this tweet. My weird ass brain has been coming up with whatever the F slur this is, and you could further categorize each as pre-modern, modern, postmodernism, and post-postmodernism. Now, I think metamodernism is sort of like a branding label that doesn't even exist, but that's, again, another video for another time. The thing is that the surreal meme era was this total exhaustion of culture, like I said, but it was, in a way, the forest fire that cleared all of the dead wood until we can arrive, and this is where I'm going to get to my thesis part. This is the last era, which is 2019 till now, the post-irony era, what people would call meta-modern, post, New Sincerity, David Foster Wallace, all of that stuff. What that means is now memes no longer either A, capacity to express just a singular emotion, or B, the capacity to express a annoying event or a singular occurrence or a mundane, everyday, little trouble sort of thing, the way that the classic era Rage comics did. Because what happened with Rage comics, they died because people became too specific in terms of what they were trying to express rather than the memes evolving themselves. So then what happened was Rage comics would just I stubbed my toe and that's a Rage comic, foo, So then that became a deadening of the original vitality of the memes. So then the Mlg era came about, and there was a changing of the guard, and there was new forms of memes that came about. But then some old ones. Like I say, Wojak is largely a more a maturation of the classic era memes. And then, of course, Peppy is the specter haunting in the background of the dark, dangerous Chan culture. Whereas the surreal memes was the total cementing of the Reddit humor that took over the internet during the later 2010s. Reddit was calling themselves the front page of the internet and so forth. But now we have the Post Sincerity era, and this is my thesis. I think that memes are going to enter a time of dramatic seriousness and starkness, but also a mature creativity, the likes of which we've never seen. The way that Dadaism was this like neo-hippie, like, proto-hippie expressionism of like, the possibilities of things and how we can distort the perceptions that we hold of reality itself. We can use automatism to generate different unconscious foibles in the antipodes of the mind that can then leap forth into the space of the work of art. But then what happened during the later Weimar era, when things started to seriously collapse, now we get German Expressionism. We get a confrontation with the starkness of reality. We get also a confrontation with the starkness of the fatalistic nature of the system and the world that we live in itself within, like, whatever you want to call it. If you're on the left, you can call it capitalist realism, neoliberalism, whatnot, or you could say it's modernity, it's the Kali Yuga, it's the changing of cycles, it's the, Spenglerian winter, whatever you want to call it. This is what post-irony is. There is no longer any room for the sort of silly absurdism and surrealism and automatism of the surreal era of memes, because there's no cultural space for them. As much as Reddit tries to like inflict this stupid, like, I'm actually sophisticated by pretending I'm not, like ironic humor of things being random, things being zany, juxtapositions that don't make any sense, the post-irony era is going to usher in a sort of new sincerity of memes that are going to have a deep black-pilling and also subsequently tribalistic nature to them, because they're going to expose all of our differences, all of our unconscious fears and ennui, and sort of the things that we chose to ignore for so long. We can no longer ignore them. So this is what the Trollji meme is. This is like the troll face who was once an emblem of the classic era, the troll, the sort of pettiness, the immaturity, the troll science memes. They're kind of clever, but yet at the same time they were absurd. That gives way to Trollji, where that particular edit of the troll face is this stark existential horror, because it is confronting, the horror of reality itself by saying that all of these negative things, it's inevitability. Same with the, the astronaut with the gun, it always has been. So you mean to tell me that all of these stark truths that we tried to ignore, now we have this epiphany where we realize that they were true and there's nothing we can do about it? Always has been. Always will be, To quote Barnes from Platoon, if that's the way it's going to be, then that's the way it is, right? And also we have, the stupid Among Us meme. But notice how the Among Us meme, okay, originally it started off as this, like, Twitch culture, which is heavily related to Reddit, heavily related to BreadTube. All of these people playing Among Us, and the memes become ironic and absurd, and there's Among Us everywhere. But then Among Us itself is this meta contrarian form of meme making, the way that I would say, what's the classic one? Milhouse is not a meme is a meme in itself. So like Milhouse himself is not a meme, but saying that Milhouse is not a meme is also a meme. It's sort of like this contained Skinner box to observe the way in which a meme in a relatively short span of time lives, then achieves mainstream prominence, then dies, then becomes cringe, right? Becomes culturally dead. But what happened was the Among Us meme was already dead in the afterbirth. It was already delivered stillborn. Because the fact that Among Us was so popular proves that now we've gotten to the point where a forced meme is a forced meme and we're going to kill it right off the bat, right as it's coming from out of the gate. So Among Us is known for being this next meta layer of, well, that meme is cringe, right? It's an artistic experiment in some ways, in that you are creating a self-contained object and you are seeing the progression of it in such a small infinitesimal amount of time, the way that some scientist in the Hadron Collider creates a new element that can only exist for like a fraction of a second, but then it's gone. You are creating this environment, this Skinner box around the meme, and saying this is how we create memes and this is how we butcher them. The slaughterhouse floor. That is what Among Us is. So now when people like even see Among Us, they're like, oh, that's cringe, right? So now we have this artistic sort of Skinner box of viewing the mechanics of the meme. It's like seeing the behind the scenes of how a meme is created, how a meme is divorced from the world, that it's created from, and it dies. Now it becomes a reified piece of cultural artifact in detritus. Now we also have Are You Winning Yet, Son? And Are You Winning Yet, Son is this recognition that the people that ran this world, our parents and the parents before them, the people that have structural power over us, the name, the order of the Father, is now in some ways mocking us, half mocking us, but also in other ways half feigning concern for our state and our plight. Because there's so many different avenues, there's so many different edits, and a lot of recently, there was a change in this Are You Winning Yet, Son, where the sun actually is winning. The sun is becoming a quote-unquote bloomer or whatever. So there's a lot of different avenues for that. The Are You Winning Yet, Son is coming to terms with the younger form of masculinity that was once young and vital and creative. Now we are maturing. And now we are finally recognizing the order of the Father that we tried to rebel against so deeply. So millennial men, we no longer are the pure Eternus, as Jung called it. We are no longer the young demigod of the half boy, half man that is eternally old but eternally young and creative and frivolic. Now we are becoming our parents, and now we have the order of the Father with his corncob hat and with his cigarette asking us, are you winning yet? Is all of the plans that you have foisted upon the world, all of your well-laid plans, all of the things that you invested so much time in, whether it's meme magic or video games or various odious political and ideological schemes and different forms of creating unique culture on the internet through message boards and forums and then later social media, all of the things that you've done on the internet. It's a way for the internet culture through memes to truly examine itself, millennial internet culture, to look at itself, because this is largely a male space still. It's become sort of like feminized in some ways. The feminine energy has been pulling on it. There is the digital anima, but largely in terms of creating meme culture, it is largely the expression of young men. So therefore, this churlish, young, haughty masculinity is now slowly starting to simmer into this crushing realization of, wow, we are now being observed by the people that came before us, and they're asking us. The ask of the Father is in some ways more important than anything else, to ask, are you winning yet? Have your plans actually come to fruition? So this is, in the New Sincerity Era, a serious, deep, mimetic reflection on the state of society and the state of digital hyperreal civilization itself. Because there's edits where the sun is being plugged into the VR machine, being plugged in the Neuralink, and becoming this like Landian monstrosity. And memes themselves also in the post-ironic era are starting to accelerate, in the sense that now we are seeing memes die at such an incredibly breakneck speed that we can't really grasp the actual meat to them anymore. It's becoming this like virilio, speed is dictating the pace of everything, to the point where we're achieving like meme moksha, where we are finally being released from the original context of memes, which was irony, which was spoofing things, which was trying to find sense in a very senseless Wild West environment, because the internet no longer is a Wild West anymore, because the internet is largely predicated upon North American culture. I mean, it's arguable, but it's true. And what does North America always do? It closes the frontier. The Turner thesis. The internet is now closing. And so the post-ironic era is meme culture, because I guess maybe millennials we're getting older. We're seriously looking at ourselves and we're saying there's no more room for joking. There's no more room for irony. We ain't got time to be ironic, because we have to examine the stark truths of things. And so now our memes are no longer an expression of like meta-contrarian irony. They are no longer detached from their signified. They're no longer rootless signifiers that don't mean anything, that don't even point to anything. They're like anti-signifiers. That is what Reddit humor is. It is an anti-signifier. It's like cold pockets and ridiculous puns and trying to have this like detached like Chapo Trap House, nothing means anything, man. It's all ironic. I can't believe you're caring about things. Oh my god, that's so uncool. It's basically like trying to LARP like Gen X like Gen X liberal comedy humor type of culture, with of course like a progressive overlay, which is, you know, another sort of point of contradiction in itself. But what's happening now is that in some ways on the left, it's because woke culture has instantiated itself to such a degree where ironic humor is no longer couth because it can be misinterpreted and so forth. And on the right, of course, new sincerity is like the biggest thing, because all of our memes, okay, notice how Peppy, for instance, Peppy became the bloated obese graper. Peppy became, it was ultra smug and ultra contrarian to now this total sincere expression of this unconscious energy that the young online right expresses. So now we've abandoned a lot of what made us sort of like this contrarian and edgy, obsessed conglomerate of small tribes. Now we're just taking the mask off. I mean, what do you think the gamer had yes meme comes from? It's a recognition of a sincerity of our beliefs, right? And for good or for bad, because a lot of times it's bad, let's face it, you know. But what's happening now is the post-irony phase of meme culture. I truly believe, and you know, without breaking the crystal ball, like Robert Hughes said, every time the aught critic tries to break out the crystal ball, they're usually wrong. It's true though. But here's me breaking out my crystal ball. I think that the era of new sincerity is here to stay because any generation that comes after us, the Zoomers, Gen Alpha, you name it, and the Zoomers, they're in a lot of ways in a worse position than us millennials. They will recognize that the quest for irony, the quest from escape, the quest towards escapism, the escape from the confines of the crushing real towards the imagined, that's no longer going to cut it. So now we have, in the post-irony era, memes that no longer express these emotions and these ironically detached sentiments that divorce us from the real. Now memes are no longer about humor as such, but rather they are expressions of a deep longing and a deep pain within us to recognize the fatalism of our world right now. In a lot of ways, you could say that the 2020 erection is this indication of it, because now the impersonal, sclerotic, I know like everyone says that stupid word sclerotic, but it's true. The sclerotic impersonal managerial state, the globo-liberal end of history managerial state has said, you know, now we're here forever. Now all of your petty idealisms and all of your edgy contrarian trolling, it was all for naught, because now this like terminal late Obama era, late Clinton era existence of everyone living within like a progressively worsening managerial state that doesn't really have any zest or verve or life in it. Now that's like, it's kind of like how hippies woke up in 1971 and they saw Richard Nixon. It's that same reality, in the sense that there's no life left in anything that is genuinely transgressive on a more mainstream scale. What's going to happen is that a lot of people are going to look at themselves and they're going to seriously contemplate the direction of meme culture. And there's already people that are doing this. Again, you know, there's people that are seriously looking at what meme culture is all about and really viewing it through the lens of genuine expressions of works of art rather than just something that doesn't mean anything. Because this whole thing about the internet doesn't matter, it's serious business, which is an ironic statement in itself, that's not going to cut it anymore. And so the response to this graph, apart from saying that it's wrong, shows that we are seriously now contemplating the realities that we're living in. And the post-irony epoch is an expression of this. So these are just some thoughts on this very kind of haphazard graph that someone made. So as always, God bless and goodbye.